Today we're going to dive into an example case study to answer the question of, can you retire with a $400,000 portfolio? So let's dive right into it. Here we have Jeff and Jen. Today Jeff and Jen are 60 years old. Currently they're working. Jeff's salary is $80,000 a year and Jen's salary is $65,000 a year. We're just going to use the Social Security estimates. The way that this works is the program will use the current salary and salary increases. We're assuming 3% per year to estimate future Social Security benefits. Going into their savings, Jeff has a 401k. He puts away 3% and is matched at 3%. Jen has a 401k. She puts away 5% and is matched at 5%. Pre-retirement, they have monthly expenses in the amount of $6,500. Now jumping into what we'll be talking about today. We can see here that their total investment portfolio between Jeff and Jen is $400,000, all in those 401ks, those tax-deferred accounts. Jeff's 401k, we have a balance of $250,000, and in Jen's 401k, we have a balance of $150,000. We can see here they have some other assets, but for the sake of this video, we're going to focus on those investments. Going into their goals, if possible, they would like to retire at the age of 66, so in 6 years, spend $6,000 per month in retirement, and we're also going to assume a joint vacation goal in the amount of $5,000. This happens every year. It starts at their retirement, and we're going to assume that this occurs for 15 years. Going into the retirement analysis, we can see here that as of today, they have a 100% probability of success. And at the end of the plan, we're assuming that they'll have about $5.8 million in ending assets. So right away, if we do some quick math and we look at their portfolio, we know that today they have that balance of $400,000. Well, $400,000, if we just assume a hypothetical 6% annual rate of return across both Jeff and Jen's 401k, we can see here that that will produce $24,000 in income, or $2,000 per month. What we mentioned is that they have monthly expenses in the amount of $6,000. So obviously, we're going to have other income to make up for that income gap. The reason I use 6% is when we think about our withdrawal rate and how much we're pulling from our portfolio, it's important to keep in mind all of the risks associated. What happens if we pull too much from our portfolio? That might lead to longevity risk. So for Jeff and Jen, if we're solely relying on our portfolio income, we can see here that they're going to have that income gap of $4,000, assuming that they want to spend $6,000 in retirement. So that $4,000 needs to come from elsewhere. But before we really dive into the plan, let's take a look at their portfolio allocation to get a better idea of what they have relative to their investments. And as we can see here, as of today, 100% of their portfolio across both of those 401ks is allocated into equity, stocks, 0% into fixed income. Here we have a hypothetical annual rate of return of 12.3% and a standard deviation of 16%. And now pre-retirement, this might make sense for them. Leading up to the age of 60 now, they haven't needed access to any of these funds, but as we mentioned, they're going to retire in 6 short years and they're going to be relying on this portfolio in retirement for income. Therefore, we need to think about our asset allocation. Are we too risky today if in 6 years we want to start pulling money from these accounts? So looking at our portfolio, if we assume a 12.3% annual rate of return, we can see here that that will equate to about $49,000 per year in income, or $4,100 per month. But like we just said, with that portfolio allocation, we're taking on substantially more risk. What does this mean? Well, as we can see here, we have a standard deviation of 16% versus a balanced portfolio of 8.6%. That means that on any given year, our portfolio can deviate from this standard return of 12.3% by as much as 16% and more. Again, this is just the average. If we look at growthy portfolios, sure, we're taking on more risk and therefore, theoretically, we will have more return. But a couple things to keep in mind is our maximum drawdown in a given year is going to be substantially more than that of a balanced, moderate, conservative, or preservation allocation. If you think about portfolios that had that growth allocation, during the '08 crisis or the dot-com bubble. These portfolios saw significant drawdowns. And if you were relying on that portfolio for income in retirement, then you were forced to sell at a substantial loss. Now, if we had a more conservative or balanced or moderate portfolio, then what we can see here is sure, our annual return is much lower than that of our portfolio today, but as is our standard deviation, meaning on any given year, our portfolio will have more stability. It won't deviate from that average return as much as a more risky, aggressive portfolio. So when we think about how much income can my $400,000 portfolio produce in retirement, we can, yes, just look at your portfolio as a whole. But in addition to that, we want to think about the other income that you have in retirement. And so when we start thinking about our plan, there's 6 main things that we here look at. Number 1, what are your retirement goals? What do you want to accomplish in retirement? We saw for Jeff and Jen that they would like to spend that $6,000 per month, but then in addition to that, they would like to spend $5,000 per year on travel. All of this adjusted for inflation. On top of that, they would like to retire at the age of 66. So those are their retirement goals. Now, after we identify those goals, we go into where is our income in retirement coming from? How are we going to spend? How are we going to make enough income in retirement so that we can spend that $6,000? And then we identify those expenses, those things that, make that $6,000 per month expense in retirement. And then we look at our withdrawal rate, our investment portfolio, our portfolio allocation, then finally our tax plan for retirement. And so as we can see here, between their Social Security benefit for both Jeff and Jen and their portfolio, we're in a really good spot for retirement today. Sure, there's other things that we need to consider, like additional healthcare costs, long-term care, etc., but this is a really good starting point. If we go into our withdrawal rate here, we can see that our withdrawal rate for our proposed plan here is, sub 6% for the lion's share of retirement. And then later on in retirement, we're pulling out a little bit more. We can see that our withdrawal rate is pretty substantial at the age of 75. Now, why is this? Well, if we recall, all of our money, all of our invested assets today are in those 401ks, those tax deferred accounts. So at 75, we're going to have required minimum distributions where we are required to take out a certain amount of money from those accounts every year. But before the age of 75, we can see that our withdrawal rate is substantially less. Why is our withdrawal rate so high at the age of 66? Well, this is because our goal of vacation, that $5,000 goal, has started. But in addition to that, we retire at the age of 66. And so there is a year-ish there where we have no income because we don't collect Social Security, assuming our plan today until the age of 67. So that $400,000 portfolio, if we think about this in practice, we should probably have a set retirement allocation that's different than our pre-retirement allocation. And in fact, since we are looking to pull money from our portfolio in retirement, it might make sense for Jeff and Jen to throttle down the risk in their portfolio. So let's assume that they go with a growth portfolio. For the sake of this example, we're assuming a 70-30 portfolio, 70% equity, 30% fixed income for a hypothetical rate of return of 8.9%, a standard deviation of 11.3%. And then in retirement, let's assume that we have a moderate portfolio. And for the sake of this example, if we go back into the investments here, we can see that a moderate portfolio is a 60-40 portfolio, 60% equity, 40% fixed income with a hypothetical annual rate of return of 8.2% and a standard deviation of 9.9%. Now again, depending on their exact income needs, your portfolio might be a little bit different. And there's some other things that we might consider, like opening up a taxable account today, maybe putting some money away in that, letting that grow, and then in retirement pulling from that account first. That's something that we can look at in just a second. But if we assume that in retirement we have that moderate allocation, today we have the growth allocation, we can see here that this does nothing to the probability of success in retirement. And if we go to our ending assets here, we can see that we have $4 million less in ending assets. We go from 5.8 million to 1.76 million. Again, our portfolio is still compounding, meaning our portfolio relative to the return that it is producing per year is over and above the amount that we're pulling from our portfolio on an annual basis. So again, with that $400,000 portfolio. If we assume that we have this moderate allocation of 8.2%, we can see here that that will produce $32,800 per year in returns, or $2,733 every month. Going into our growth portfolio at 8.9%, if we take 400,000, multiply that by 8.9%, we can see here that we'll have $35,600 per year in growth. Monthly, that's $2,966. Again, our monthly expense in retirement is $6,000, but we are subsidized with our Social Security benefit for both Jeff and Jen. Now, if we didn't have that benefit, obviously we'd be running, in this case, a $3,000+ monthly deficit, but this is why it's important to, before retirement, identify where your income's coming from, and then identify how much can my $400,000 portfolio produce based on my investment, my portfolio allocation. So I want to go back to something that I mentioned earlier, the taxable account. If we go into our retirement analysis and we go into our cash flows, we can break down our cash flows every year. And what we can see here is from today until retirement, we have $20,000+ in spend from unsaved cash flows. That means that we have $20,000+ in additional income, discretionary income every year. We should do something with this, whether it's putting more into our 401k or maybe opening up that taxable account. And in that case, that would be the account that we would pull from first using the traditional withdrawal order in retirement. Okay, so now we did just that. We assumed that we opened up the taxable account and we started with $20,000. And then we put away $15,000 every single year from today up until retirement. And as we can see here, this substantially increased our ending assets, yes. But in addition to that, what we did was when it comes to how we withdraw our assets, we gave ourselves another option. Using the traditional withdrawal order, again, we're going to pull from that taxable account first, then our tax deferred accounts. And if we elect to do Roth conversions between now and retirement or in retirement from our tax-free accounts as the last account that we pull from. So adding our taxable account here, if we go into our cash flows and we go into the summary, we can see here that our spend from unsaved cash flows has substantially dropped. And we can actually look at this again and better identify, maybe we add a little bit more to the taxable account, or maybe we add a little bit more to our 401k. All of this together will allow for you to further build that portfolio. So yes, today it's that $400,000 portfolio, but maybe there's opportunity to further optimize your monthly and annual cash flow to actually increase that portfolio balance before retirement. And so when you think about retirement, in the case of this example, for Jeff and Jen, we can see here that between their portfolio income, however you want to slice that, whether that's a moderate portfolio, a growth portfolio, a conservative portfolio, whatever that is, we have our portfolio income from that $400,000. And now, in addition to that, from our taxable account. And then we have our Social Security benefit. And today we just assume that they're taking Social Security at full retirement age. For a different video, we can go into how to optimize your Social Security strategy. But between that and their portfolio income, we can see that comfortably $6,000 makes sense for them. So now let's see if retiring at the age of 65 for Jeff and Jen is possible, while still spending that $6,000. And we can see here that yes, this does nothing to the probability of success. Sure, it lowers our median ending assets, but they're still in a good spot for retirement. Now, what if we said, hey, what if we retire at the age of 62? What does this do to our overall plan? We can see here that we go from 100% down to a 59% probability of success with $275,000 in median ending assets. And so the point here is when you have a really good plan and a structure around how you're going to approach retirement, where your income's coming from, what your monthly expenses are, you can start playing around with the various inputs on what does it look like if I retire early? What if I spend more in retirement? What if I change my portfolio balance? What if I add to my portfolio? Is there an opportunity to do that? What if I stop contributing to my portfolio today? How does that impact my retirement and the income that my portfolio can produce? So more than just multiplying an annual rate of return into that portfolio balance, it's really important to look at your entire plan and identify how your portfolio plays a role in your plan. Your portfolio, at the end of the day, is the vehicle that helps you pursue and achieve those retirement goals that you've been working so hard for. If you want a plan just like this, then I invite you to click the Create Your DIY Retirement Plan in the description, and you will be on your way in no time. We'll see you there. Thank you so much.